Rain slammed against the glass walls of Caedric Valecrest's penthouse, as if Manhattan itself was trying to warn him. The city below glittered in broken streaks of gold and red, Fifth Avenue drowning under winter rain, Central Park swallowed by darkness, the skyline looking expensive and lonely at the same time. Caedric stood near the kitchen island, with his tie loosened and his iPhone face down beside a half-empty glass of water. He had just come back from a brutal investor dinner at the River Cafe, the kind of dinner where men smiled while calculating betrayal, and all he wanted was silence. Then the private elevator opened. Elowen Maris stood inside with one hand wrapped around the handle of a cheap suitcase and the other gripping a soaked canvas bag against her chest. Her sweater clung to her shoulders. Her hair was wet. Her face was pale. And for the first time since he had known her, the woman who usually looked at him like he was an inconvenience looked too exhausted to dislike anyone. Caedric did not move at first. Something about the scene felt wrong. Elowen never came to the penthouse level. Elowen barely accepted a polite good morning. Elowen always kept distance like it was oxygen. Yet now she was standing in his private elevator at nearly midnight, with everything she owned at her feet. He tried to keep his voice light because the truth already looked too heavy. "You look like the storm lost an argument with you." She gave him a tiny, tired smile that disappeared almost immediately. Long night. That was all. No sharp comment, no sarcasm, no defensive little look. Caedric noticed the tremor in her fingers. He noticed the old sneakers soaked through at the edges. He noticed the folded paper sticking out of her bag, the top line visible enough to make his chest tighten. Notice of eviction. He looked away before she caught him seeing it. Men like him were trained to read contracts, threats, weaknesses. But this did not feel like information. It felt like seeing a wound someone had tried to hide. He walked toward the kitchen and poured a glass of water instead of asking questions. He knew proud people often needed silence before help. He placed the glass on the counter. She did not take it. For a few seconds, only the rain spoke. Then he made the joke. A careless joke. A cowardly joke. A joke meant to give her an exit that did not feel like begging. "You know, you could just stay with me tonight." He expected her to roll her eyes. He expected her to call him arrogant. He expected anything except what happened next. Elowen answered before the sentence had fully died in the room. "Okay." One word, too fast. Not flirtatious, not shy, not romantic, just immediate. Like a person standing at the edge of a cliff who had been waiting for someone to offer a hand. Caedric slowly turned around. Elowen looked at the marble floor. Her face did not blush. Her mouth did not smile. She simply stood there holding herself together with such quiet force that it made the entire penthouse feel colder. That was the moment Caedric understood the joke had never been a joke to her. She had said yes because she had nowhere else to go. Emotional note, immediate shock, vulnerability, protective tension. The open loop. Why did the woman who supposedly hated him accept his offer before he even finished making it? 3 months earlier, Elowen Maris was the kind of woman people noticed only after she had already saved them. At Manhattan Pediatric Center, parents remembered her calm hands first. Children remembered her soft voice. Doctors remembered that she caught mistakes before anyone else did. But nobody remembered how tired she looked when she walked into the hospital before sunrise. Nobody except Caedric Valecrest. Every morning at 6:15, she stopped at the same Starbucks on Central Park West. Same tall coffee with too much cream. Same banana she rarely finished. Same cracked iPhone with the screen protector peeling at the corner. She always stood near the window, checking messages with the expression of someone waiting for bad news to become worse. Caedric usually entered 5 minutes later, dressed in a custom coat, carrying the type of quiet authority that made baristas stand straighter without knowing why. He was famous in Manhattan architecture circles, the billionaire founder of Valecrest Atelier, the man redesigning luxury hotels, office towers, and private residences for people who had too much money and too little peace. Women smiled at him. Men studied him. Strangers whispered. Elowen barely looked at him. The first time they spoke, she accidentally stepped backward and spilled coffee onto his coat. Everyone in the Starbucks froze like they had witnessed a crime against money. Caedric looked down at the stain, then at her. "Are you hurt?" She stared at him suspiciously, as if kindness from a rich man had fine print. "I am fine." Then she grabbed napkins, cleaned the counter, apologized once, and left before he could say another word. After that, their small collisions became part of the city's routine. Elevator doors, grocery aisles, the hospital lobby. Barnes and Noble on quiet evenings, where Elowen read medical textbooks she could not afford to buy and returned them to the shelf with almost religious care. She always kept him at a distance, not rude enough to be cruel, not warm enough to invite hope. That should have made him lose interest. Instead, it made him pay attention. He saw the details other people missed, the worn soles of her sneakers, the way she stretched her wrist after long shifts, the Amazon box delivered to her apartment every month with medical supplies inside. The citizen watch she checked obsessively when she was late for the bus. One night, after a snowstorm, Caedric found her asleep in the hospital cafeteria, with her head resting near an untouched coffee and one hand still gripping a paperback copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Her scrubs were wrinkled. Her hair had slipped from its clip. She looked younger asleep, but not softer. Even unconscious, she looked like she was guarding a door. A nurse passing by saw him looking and whispered, "She works double shifts for her brother. Treatments are expensive." Caedric said nothing. He simply looked back at Elowen. He had built towers that touched clouds. He had signed contracts that moved markets. But this woman, asleep under fluorescent hospital lights with a book about endurance in her hand, made him feel the weight of something he had forgotten. Real strength rarely announced itself. Sometimes it just stayed awake all night and went back to work in the morning. Emotional note: quiet admiration and hidden suffering. Open loop: how much pain can Elowen carry before even her pride begins to crack? Elowen had learned early that panic was expensive. Panic made you sloppy. Panic made you late. Panic made you forget medication schedules and payment deadlines, and which bill could wait another week without consequences. So when the eviction notice arrived, she did not scream. She stood in the hallway of her small Upper West Side apartment and read it twice. Then she read it a third time because sometimes cruelty needed repetition before the mind accepted it. The rent had risen again. The landlord wanted the unit renovated and leased to someone who could pay more. 30 days became 14. 14 became 72 hours after a technicality buried in the lease. Elowen called the office. She spoke calmly. She explained her brother's medical situation. She offered a partial payment. She asked for time, not mercy. The woman on the phone sounded bored. "I am sorry, Miss Maris. The decision is final." Sorry. That little word people used when they wanted to sound human while doing something inhuman. In the bedroom, Orion coughed softly. He was 19, too thin, too pale, and too determined to pretend he was not scared. He had a rare immune condition that turned ordinary days into negotiations with hospitals and insurance companies. He was also the only family Elowen had left. When he entered the kitchen, she had already folded the eviction notice and hidden it beneath a medical bill. He saw it anyway. He always saw more than she wanted him to. Ellie. She hated when he used that voice. The gentle one. The one that made him sound like he was trying to take care of her. She forced a smile. Dinner first, crisis later. Toast is not dinner. It is if you emotionally commit to it. He laughed, and for a moment the apartment felt less doomed. That night, after Orion fell asleep, Elowen sat at the tiny kitchen table with her MacBook Air open, staring at numbers that refused to become possible. Hospital balance, pharmacy refill, graduate school payment, rent debt, groceries, transportation. She moved money around in her head until the math became a cage. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Orion's best friend's mother. We can keep him here for a few nights if you need. No questions. Elowen stared at the message until her vision blurred. Not because she was weak, because relief could hurt when it arrived too late. By 10:30 that night, Orion was safely asleep at his friend's apartment, believing his sister needed to work an emergency shift. By 11:15, Elowen packed one suitcase. By 11:40, she stood outside her building while rain cut through her sweater, and the doorman avoided her eyes because pity was easier from a distance. She had two options: a 24-hour diner near Columbus Circle, or the lobby of the luxury building where she knew the security guard sometimes let tenants sit during storms. She chose the lobby, not because she wanted Caedric to see her, because she was hoping he would not. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. When the elevator opened on the penthouse level by mistake after a security glitch, and Caedric Valecrest stood there in silence, Elowen realized the most humiliating thing about losing everything was not the loss itself. It was being seen. Emotional note, survival pressure, and grounded heartbreak. Open loop, will Elowen let Caedric help, or will her shame push her away from the only safe place left? Caedric did not ask why she was there. That was the first thing Elowen noticed. He did not demand a story. He did not use concern like a spotlight. He simply gave her water, placed clean towels outside the guest room, and said, "Stay as long as you need." That sentence nearly broke her, because it gave her dignity when she was prepared for judgment. The guest room looked bigger than her entire apartment. Soft gray sheets. A window overlooking Central Park. A small writing desk with a lamp that glowed warmly against the rain. Elowen stood in the doorway for almost a full minute before stepping inside. She did not unpack. Unpacking felt too close to hope. The next morning, she woke at 5 out of habit and found the penthouse silent. It looked like wealth without fingerprints. Italian marble, dark wood shelves, architecture books arranged too perfectly, a black grand piano nobody played, a Mont Blanc pen beside blueprints on the office desk. Everything was beautiful. Nothing felt lived in. Then she heard a soft whine from the kitchen. Atlas, Caedric's old golden retriever, was trying to stand and failing. Elowen dropped to her knees immediately. Her voice softened in the way it always did around pain. "Hey, big guy, let me see." By the time Caedric entered wearing a black t-shirt and sleep-roughened hair, Elowen had already checked the dog's joints, warmed a towel, and opened her phone to research canine arthritis supplements. He stopped in the doorway. Most women looked different in his penthouse the morning after entering it. Self-conscious, strategic, curious about what expensive thing belonged to whom. Elowen looked completely focused on his dog. "Your dog needs softer food, a better bed, and a vet appointment that should have happened 2 months ago. Caedric blinked. "Good morning to you too." She froze, suddenly remembering where she was. "Sorry. That was intrusive." "No. It was accurate. That was worse." He smiled. She tried not to. Over the next few days, the penthouse changed in small ways that felt enormous. Soup simmered on the stove after her hospital shifts. Atlas slept better. The kitchen lights stayed warm late into the night. Jazz played softly because Elowen said silence made expensive rooms feel haunted. Caedric began coming home earlier without admitting why. He told himself it was because he worked better from home. Then one evening, he walked in and found her standing barefoot in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, laughing at Atlas because the dog had stolen a dish towel and looked proud of his crime. Snow fell beyond the windows. Steam rose from a pot on the stove. Elowen looked tired. Yes, but alive. Warm. Real. Caedric stood there with his coat still on and realized something dangerous. His penthouse had never felt like a home until a woman with nowhere to go walked into it carrying a broken life in a suitcase. Emotional note. Domestic warmth and emotional attachment. Did the open loop is Elowen healing inside Caedric's home, or is Caedric the one being saved? Vanessa Voss did not knock like a guest. She entered like a verdict. Emerald silk, diamond studs, Cartier bracelet, hair arranged in effortless waves that had probably taken 2 hours and 3 professionals to create. She was beautiful in the way luxury stores were beautiful, polished, cold, and designed to make ordinary people feel unworthy of entering. Elowen was in the kitchen making tea when Vanessa stepped out of the private elevator carrying a bottle of wine from a Fifth Avenue boutique. Atlas barked once, then retreated behind Elowen's legs. Smart dog. Vanessa looked from the tea mug to the bare feet, to the oversized sweater, and smiled slowly. Oh. One small sound. Enough contempt to poison the room. Elowen set the kettle down. You must be Vanessa, and you must be unexpected. Elowen almost smiled. Almost. Vanessa moved closer, eyes scanning everything. The folded blanket on the couch, the nursing textbook near the window, the second coffee mug drying beside the sink. Evidence. To a woman like Vanessa, intimacy was not emotional. It was territorial. I heard Caedric was helping someone, she said lightly. I did not realize he had started bringing charity cases home. Elowen felt the words land. Years of training kept her posture steady. She had survived overdue bills, hospital corridors, landlords, and men who thought kindness made them owners. She would survive one socialite with cruel lipstick. That is an interesting thing to say out loud, Elowen replied calmly. Vanessa laughed. Relax. I am joking. No, Caedric said from the hallway. You are being cruel. The room went still. Vanessa turned. Caedric stood there in a dark coat, expression unreadable, but his eyes were not. His eyes were ice. Vanessa recovered quickly because women like her practiced recovery the way others practiced breathing. I was only teasing. Caedric walked into the room and stood beside Elowen, not touching her, but close enough for the message to be unmistakable. Do not tease my guest, my guest. Not charity, not mistake, not secret. Elowen looked down because the protection hit harder than the insult. Vanessa saw that too. Her smile changed. It became smaller, sharper, more dangerous. In that moment, she understood what Caedric had not fully admitted even to himself. Elowen was no longer a temporary problem in his life. She was becoming the center of it. And Vanessa Voss did not lose quietly. Emotional note. First public protection and villain threat. Open loop. What will Vanessa do now that she knows Elowen has something she never had? Caedric's genuine attention. The Plaza Hotel looked like a palace built for people who had forgotten how to feel embarrassed. Crystal chandeliers burned above the ballroom. Champagne moved through the crowd on silver trays. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed donations with the same voices they used for acquisitions. Women in Dior and Carolina Herrera smiled with perfect teeth and sharper intentions. Elowen stood near the entrance in a simple navy dress Caedric had not chosen for her. That mattered. She had bought it herself from a small boutique on sale, and she wore it like armor. Caedric looked at her once and forgot what he had been about to say. "You look beautiful." She adjusted the small bracelet on her wrist, uncomfortable with sincerity. "You sound surprised?" "I sound honest." Before she could answer, Vanessa appeared beside them in white silk, glowing under the chandelier like a blade catching light. "Caedric, darling, the board is waiting to see who you brought." The word "who" sounded like what? At dinner, Vanessa waited until the table filled with investors, donors, and women who measured worth by last names. Then she smiled across the candles. "So, Elowen, tell us, what exactly do you contribute to Caedric's life?" The table quieted instantly. It was a perfect humiliation, elegant enough to deny, cruel enough to wound. Elowen felt every eye turn toward her. A younger version of her might have looked down. A more desperate version might have over-explained. But she had learned something from hospital rooms and eviction notices. You do not owe your dignity a defense every time someone tries to steal it. She lifted her glass of water. "Peace," she said softly. Caedric turned his head toward her. The room seemed to vanish from his face. Vanessa smiled, but the smile cracked at the edges. Before anyone could recover, a loud crash erupted near the stage. Bradford Elmire, a major investor, collapsed against the table, one hand clawing at his throat. Panic spread through the ballroom like fire. Someone screamed. Someone dropped a champagne flute. Security rushed forward and did nothing useful. Elowen moved before anyone else even understood. She was on her knees beside him in seconds. Allergic reaction. "Does he have an injector?" Her voice cut through the chaos with clean authority. His wife sobbed that it was in his jacket. Elowen found it, administered it, checked his airway, kept him positioned, and spoke to him with calm precision while the wealthiest people in the room stood frozen in expensive helplessness. Minutes later, Bradford was breathing. The ambulance crew arrived and found the crisis already controlled. Silence settled over the ballroom. Not awkward silence, reverent silence. The people who had looked at Elowen like decoration now looked at her like power. Caedric helped her stand. She had blood on one knee from hitting the floor too hard. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. He did not believe her, but he believed the strength in her eyes. Across the room, Vanessa watched everyone applaud Elowen. Slowly, then fully. A standing ovation beneath chandeliers. It should have been beautiful. To Vanessa, it was unforgivable. Emotional note, public value reveal, and emotional triumph. Open loop. If Elowen just became respected in Caedric's world, why does Vanessa look more dangerous than defeated? By morning, Elowen's name was everywhere. Not because she saved a man's life. That story lasted 20 minutes online. Then Vanessa buried it under something uglier. Billionaire architect hiding secret lover in penthouse. Nurse accused of seducing wealthy client. Charity gala hero or carefully planted mistress. The photos were taken from security angles that should never have been accessible. Elowen entering Caedric's building in wet clothes. Elowen leaving the penthouse elevator. Elowen sitting beside him at the plaza. Each image cropped to remove context and sharpen shame. The internet did what the internet always does to a woman without protection. It turned her pain into entertainment. By noon, Manhattan Pediatric Center placed her on administrative leave pending review. The words were polite. The punishment was not. Elowen sat in the parking garage beneath the hospital with her phone dark in her lap. She did not cry. Crying would have been easier. Instead, she felt something colder than grief. Contamination. As if every sacrifice she had made for Orion had been twisted into something dirty. Her brother called 17 times. She could not answer. Not yet. Not while her voice still sounded like someone had pressed glass into her throat. Caedric arrived 20 minutes later in a black Mercedes S-Class, not because he cared about appearances, but because his driver had ignored 3 red lights after hearing his voice. He found her near a concrete pillar, sitting perfectly still. That stillness scared him more than tears. "Vanessa leaked it," he said. Elowen looked up slowly. "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because your reputation is bleeding now." The sentence hit him hard because it was not accusation as much as expectation. She expected him to choose reputation. Of course she did. The world had trained her well. He crouched in front of her. "My reputation can survive gossip. You should not have to." She gave a small, bitter smile. "That is exactly what men say before they ask women like me to disappear quietly." Caedric went still. She reached into her bag and handed him the penthouse keycard. "I am grateful for what you did. I mean that. But I cannot be the scandal attached to your name. I will not let them say I survived because I sold myself to a rich man." There it was. Not weakness. Pride. Bruised, bleeding pride. She stood before he could stop her. "Caedric, please do not make this harder." Then she walked away. He could have ordered security to block the exit. He could have used money, influence, pressure. But love that traps is just another form of control. So he let her leave. And that restraint nearly killed him. Emotional note. False scandal, public shame, painful separation. Open loop. Will Caedric protect Elowen with action, or will he become another powerful man who lets her suffer quietly? Vanessa Voss expected a private phone call. She expected anger she could soften, legal trouble she could redirect, a scandal she could turn into strategy. What she did not expect was Caedric Valecrest walking into the Monday board meeting with no tie, no greeting, and the expression of a man who had already decided the sentence before the trial began. The conference room overlooked Park Avenue. Around the table sat investors, attorneys, senior partners, and people who had underestimated silence for the last time. Vanessa sat near the far end in a cream dress, her Rolex catching the morning light, her face composed enough to fool everyone except the man she had tried to control. Caedric connected his iPad to the screen. No introduction, no drama, just evidence. Private emails appeared first, then payments to a gossip outlet, then unauthorized access logs from building security, then messages coordinating the release of Elowen's photos with a financial rumor designed to shake confidence before a major acquisition. The room changed temperature. Vanessa crossed her legs slowly, but her hand tightened around her pen. "Caedric," she said with careful softness, "this is not the place." He looked at her. "You made humiliation public, so will the truth be." Nobody spoke. The next file opened. Stock movement, timed perfectly, profitable, illegal. The company attorney leaned forward. One board member cursed under his breath. Vanessa finally stood. "You do not understand what I was trying to protect." Caedric's voice dropped. "You were protecting access to me, not the company, not the board, not anything but your own hunger." Her face hardened. "She is nothing." That sentence ended her. Caedric stepped closer to the table, palms flat against the polished wood. "Elowen Maris is a nurse who saved Aman's life while you tried to destroy hers because you were jealous. She is not nothing. She is everything you pretend to be and never became." The silence after that was absolute. Legal counsel escorted Vanessa out in front of everyone she had spent years trying to impress. Reporters waiting downstairs caught the moment her perfect face cracked behind oversized sunglasses. By afternoon, her contracts were suspended. By evening, her name was attached to an investigation. By night, the same social pages that once worshipped her called her downfall spectacular. But Caedric did not celebrate. He left the boardroom while investors were still demanding next steps. His assistant tried to stop him near the elevator. "Sir, the acquisition call starts in 9 minutes. Cancel it. It is worth billions." Caedric looked at him once. "She is worth more." Then he stepped into the elevator and went to find the woman who had taught his empty life how to feel warm again. Emotional note, revenge payoff, public justice, male lead proves love through sacrifice. Open loop, can Caedric reach Elowen before shame convinces her she is safer alone? Snow fell over Manhattan in soft white sheets by the time Caedric found her. Not at the hospital, not at her old apartment, not at the diner near Columbus Circle. He found her where he should have looked first. Barnes and Noble, second floor, philosophy section. Elowen sat near the window with a Starbucks cup cooling beside her and a worn copy of Meditations open in her hands. She looked calm from a distance. That hurt most, because Caedric understood the difference now between peace and emotional surrender. She was not okay. She was practicing how to live without him. He sat across from her. She did not look surprised. Maybe part of her had been hoping he would come. Maybe part of her hated herself for hoping. For a while, neither of them spoke. Around them, people turned pages. Coffee machines hissed downstairs, and snow blurred the city beyond the glass. Finally, Caedric said, "You never hated me, did you?" Elowen looked down at the book. A small laugh escaped her, fragile and heartbreaking. No, that was the problem. The truth filled the space between them gently, not like an explosion, like a door opening in a room that had been locked for years. She closed the book. "I avoided you because you were kind when I needed you to be arrogant. You noticed things when I needed to be invisible. You made me feel safe, and I did not trust that feeling." Caedric leaned forward. "I should have protected you faster." "You did protect me, not enough." She finally looked at him. What happened? "Vanessa is facing legal action. The board knows everything. The hospital will receive the full report tonight. Your suspension will end. Your name will be cleared." Elowen blinked slowly, trying to absorb the words. "You did all that." He shook his head. "I should have done more. You left a billion-dollar acquisition meeting. I left a room full of people who thought money was urgent. It was not. You were." Tears filled her eyes then, and this time she did not immediately hide them. Caedric's voice softened. "Come home with me." Her mouth trembled. "Caedric. Not because you need a place to stay. Not because I want to rescue you." He swallowed. "Come home because I love you. No performance. No grand gesture for an audience. Just a man who had spent years controlling every room finally surrendering to the one truth he could not control. Elowen reached across the small table and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, his closed around them carefully. The first time she had said yes to staying with him, it was because she had nowhere else to go. This time, when she whispered yes, it was because she had finally found somewhere she wanted to belong. Emotional note, romantic release, healing, confession. Open loop, can two people who have survived betrayal learn how to trust peace? 1 year later, Elowen no longer flinched when happiness arrived quietly. Orion's treatments had worked. His cheeks filled out. His laugh came back louder than before. On good days, he joked that Caedric was too serious, and Atlas was the real man of the house. Elowen became head pediatric coordinator at Manhattan Pediatric Center. Not because Caedric made a call, but because every doctor, parent, and child in that building already knew her worth. The hospital board apologized formally. The gossip sites printed corrections nobody cared about as much as the lie. But Elowen learned something important. A woman does not need the whole world to understand her truth for the truth to remain intact. Vanessa Voss disappeared from Manhattan society with the kind of silence that follows public exposure. Her contracts collapsed. Her reputation became radioactive, and for once, cruelty did not get to rename itself as sophistication. Caedric still built towers, still wore dark suits, still frightened powerful men when they lied to him. But he no longer came home to emptiness. He came home to soup on the stove, Atlas snoring near the fireplace, Orion's textbooks spread across the dining table, and Elowen reading beside the window with her legs tucked under her. One winter evening, snow covered Central Park in white silence. The penthouse glowed with warm lamps and quiet jazz. Elowen stood at the glass, looking down at the city that had once made her feel small. Caedric came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him without thinking. That was how she knew she had healed. Her body no longer mistook safety for danger. "Do you remember the first night?" she asked. "Every second. You joked that I should stay. I was terrified you would say no." He kissed her temple. "I was terrified you only said yes because you had nowhere else to go." She turned in his arms. "That was why I said yes the first time. And now." She smiled, soft and certain. "Now I stay because this is home." Outside, Manhattan kept rushing forward, hungry, bright, and unforgiving. But inside that penthouse, love had become something quiet and solid. Not obsession, not rescue, not humiliation disguised as romance. Peace. The kind of peace that does not demand you become smaller to be held. The kind of love that proves itself through patience, protection, and presence. Elowen had once believed survival meant carrying everything alone. Caedric had once believed power meant never needing anyone. They were both wrong. The strongest hearts are not the ones that never break. They are the ones that learn to stay open without begging to be chosen. And the right person will never make you plead for dignity. They will stand beside you until you remember it was yours all along. Emotional note. Warm, cinematic closure, satisfying justice, mature love, natural, stoic lesson. Open loop, final emotional echo for audience retention and comment response.